Welcome to Milk and Sugar's podcast series, Mavericks. Every episode, I'll sit down with innovators, doers, and dreamers, from tech founders to CEOs, community activists to creatives, anyone who's reshaping Africa's business and cultural landscape. Honest conversations with interesting people who have interesting stories to tell. We'll dive into their aha moments, the real challenges, and their vision for tomorrow. This week, we are in the boardroom of the offices of our first guest on the series. I don't know if I'm going to get this right. The founder and former CEO of Capital Legacy. One of the things about this podcast is, and it's not a surprise, it won't be a surprise to you, is that everybody's got a story to tell. Where does your story start? Where would you like it to start?
You know, I think we are very quick to associate the ability of a business to deliver by its founder being at the helm. And one of the big aha moments I had at the beginning of last year when I decided to step down as the chief executive of the business I helped found is that the real testament to what you've built is if you can, in a short amount of time, hand it over to someone else to make it even better. And that's currently my test, is to say, well, can we? And there's lots of great business leaders out there in South Africa who've successfully done this. And I studied them in the lead up to my decision. You know, people like Patrice, who's obviously got a very close relationship with Capital Legacy. People like Johan van Zyl, also who's got a close. If you go look through all of these individuals, they've successfully handed over businesses that they've helped reignite or build to others to make them even more successful. So I don't think we should lose sight of that.
Well, let's face it. I mean, that you've mentioned the Mavericks of business, the guys who have been successful. And I think one of the difficult things for anybody who has founded a business, I would imagine, is making that decision yourself to actually do the handover. Because a lot of times it's the board that pushes the CEO out. But you were completely in control of that decision.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to lie, James. Every day I've got two very ginormous pills I have to take. One for FOMO and one for being a control freak. And I mean, I suppose of these attributes that maybe helped us be successful. But I take my pills diligently every day. I've encouraged my people here to tell me to stay in my lane. So it's not easy. It's not easy having your baby looked after by someone else. But then there's times when it's more often than not now, it's quite satisfying when you see what others are able to do with it, how they think about it, different to what you would have done, more often than not better. And I suppose it's something that you can get ahead of yourself if you've now founded a business that's had some degree of success. It almost defines you, and now all of a sudden you need to be humble enough to let others outshine you and outshine what you built.
It's something you've said something interesting there that I want to pick up on, because I actually want to loop back to where I started the question.
Yeah,
which is where do you want your story to start? And it's interesting that you started your story at this new juncture in your career. But the word that you use that I think is always fascinating, it's what defines you. Do you think that what you've built here defines you, or do you think that you've got enough flexibility to say, hey, I can be defined by other things now that I've stepped back from what I'm doing?
So I'm at probably one of the most scariest points of my career. So sure, there's been lots of other instances where, I mean, you've got the age-old tales of starting in a garage, not having enough to make payroll, having to bankroll the business. I've got all of those stories like any good entrepreneur worth their salt should have. But the current story I'm sitting at is to say, well, was this a once-off? Was I at the right place at the right time with the right people, with the right everything? Or can I do this again? And I've always said that I believe Capital Legacy is a once-off, and I still truly believe that Capital Legacy is a once-off. But the skills and experiences and lessons that I've learned in the short amount of time of building Capital Legacy, can that be transferred and transported into other businesses? And that's what's scaring me at the moment. I don't necessarily need the answer to be yes, but I'd like to know.
We had an interesting conversation just in passing the other day, and it was talking about this very podcast that we're doing now. I said to you that I don't know if it was an anxiety dream, but I was dreaming about this interview and making, I don't know, I guess one's mind just works in a particular way where you are focused on the things that are important to you. And your response, which has stuck with me since you said it, is like, you said, you dream about interviews, and this is you saying, you dream about interviews, I dream about insurance. We all have our thing. So it's interesting in the context of the fact that you are looking at new things and seeing what the new things are. is insurance going to be the thing that you dream about, or are you now free to dream about anything and to do anything? Do you feel constrained?
So there's absolutely no way that I'm constrained. I've, if anything, constrained myself. I've always talk about playing to your strengths and away from your weaknesses. I think there's a piece so I'm definitely playing to my strengths, which sits in insurance. I'm definitely staying away from things like accounting, which is definitely not a strength of mine. But I've given myself the latitude to also be able to connect certain things that can play nicely into financial services, can play nicely into the client value props that I believe are missing out there in our current ecosystem. And in terms of also value props for distribution, I do work closely with a lot of institutions where I think they pay a lot of lip service to, we're client-centric. But if you've never sold before, if you've never experienced what turns on or off a client, there and then at the sale or afterwards, I think then you're missing something. And I'm trying to bring that now to certain product lines. And I think that's where I've got a lot of play.
So it's interesting. I mean, this interview could go so many different ways. You've raised so many things that I want to talk about. But the one thing that stands out for me, and certainly has been a hallmark of the way in which I've perceived you since I met you, which was 2018, and started doing work with Capital Legacy, is that you've got a product that speaks to a particular segment of the market. It's like a difficult part of a person's life. It's end of life. And the one thing that's really struck me about you is that it's not just about selling the products, which you do very well, but there is a compassion that's involved there that is unlike any other business I've actually come across or any other CEO I've come across. My first question, is that genuine, or is that just a sales technique?
I think after all these years, it's got to be genuine. I think back to meetings I had on Monday, and the internal, let's call them debates, fights. The fight is real around what's going to be best. Businesses can get stuck in Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints. Pop your head out the door, go speak to the person that's taking the next customer call, and what was the last thing that was said, and listen to that. And that was the debate we had on Monday. So no, I think it's real, James. Yeah. We wouldn't have got this far if it wasn't.
I'm glad. I mean, I kind of expected that to be the answer, because over years you can start to see if it's not genuine. And I mean that has been, I think, a hallmark of the business that you've built here. Is that for entrepreneurs, for anybody who's wanting to start a business? I mean, do you think things like that are important, or is it more? So compassion is one thing, and particularly in the products that you're selling, it is an important thing. But is it important for entrepreneurs to have one thing that they focus on that will drive the business, that separates them?
There's no one thing. Everyone looks for a silver bullet to be successful with their own business, right? Because you've got this dream of having your own business, being your own boss. I've got bad news for everyone out there. There is no single one recipe. There's no single one silver bullet. There is a few things that I believed in when I began this business, and I still believe in to this day, that are essential ingredients to being successful. And maybe we can do another series or chats on them. But I'll give an example. One of them, and you will see this repeated in many, many business books, is that you need a good degree of being selfish. You need to look after yourself. What's going to make you get out of bed? And the answer is not going to be money. Is it something that you want to prove others wrong that you can succeed? Is it because you truly want to change the way something is being done with the way from a consumer or a product point of view? So is it a cause to change? What is that driving force? And being selfish and blatant about it. Money will be a byproduct of it. The second thing is, make sure you've got enough money. I've seen businesses try to start on a thread. The more money you can capitalize that business with in the beginning, the more your chances of success become. And is directly proportionate. And there's no two ways about it. Do not try to think for a second you can start a business and dream the dreams that you are dreaming if you don't have cash. Don't put yourself and your family under that pressure if you haven't got those two elements right.
Why didn't I meet you 10, 15 years ago when I started MILK+SUGAR? But that's an absolutely brilliant point, because I think a lot of people go in with just a great idea and they put people under stress and strain. And I'm going to come back to family a little bit later on, but I think the thing that's interesting is things that I've said or read in other interviews. You've sold Abflex, Tonight's specials at restaurants, water. You've sold everything. You've worked for Discovery. You've worked for Liberty. In many people's lives, and I want to know if this is true of you, there's a pivotal moment where you decide, actually, screw this, I'm not working for other people. I want to do this for myself. What was your pivotal moment that made you decide that this is what I'm going to do?
Look, the truth of the matter is I've never actually applied for a job. I've always found things like being a financial advisor or a waiter where it's up to yourself. I've never actually put in leave. But in those you're still accountable to someone, and it's in a job per se. So I would say the pivotal moment would be when almost at the end of my career as a financial planner with one of the large insurers, I decided to stop working for the percentage, the commission, and started to want to own 100% of the premium. And I suppose that then signified that I wanted to then own my own business. But it was actually more to say, well, I'm sick of being told what I can do as the distributor of this product. I want to own the product. And I want to be able to change the product to do certain things. I need 100% control of it. So that was probably in 2010 when that sort of aha moment kicked in. Also, my dad, he's late now. He pulled me to one side around that time and said, boy, you need something that's more challenging. You're driving us all nuts.
It does actually bring us back to family a bit sooner than I was expecting. But you mentioned how important it is not to put your family under strain when you're starting a business. But there's also good advice that clearly you received from your late father. How important is it to have your family on sides when you take a big risk? I mean, and I understand what you were saying. You started with money when you started Capital Legacy. You didn't start on a shoestring. But how important is it to have your family on sides when you're taking a big risk, like starting a business like this?
I mean, I don't know what it's like not to have the support. My immediate family and my extended family have just been behind me and this the whole way. I've had to miss birthdays. I've had to miss all sorts of things. I've been at dining room tables and not been present because, you've got the next stress, and they've just taken it and taken it and taken it. So I don't know what it's like not to. I can't imagine having been able to do it, having to fight two fights. And I suppose, I do have a few friends who've been in business where there's been boundaries for work life. You can't have them. If you're going to start a business, there is no life balance, I'm afraid, for that. If you want to have an exceptional result, you need to do the exceptional. And unfortunately, the bad news is that requires you to eat up into that balance. If you think for 1 second when you start in the business that it can be the other way around. That said, there does need to be moments of selfishness. You need to have self-perseverance. If you need to go do running, go do running. If you need to go play squash, go play squash. If you need to go climb mountains, go do that. You need to have that moment of, because the buck stops with you. You've got no one else you can complain to and vent to when you're starting a business. So you need to find that, you need to have that selfish space.
This is almost a premature question. I mean, because I'm saying, looking back on your career, you really are at the start of a new chapter of your career. But looking back, can you honestly say that those sacrifices are worthwhile? Because I think while you're thinking about that, because I think for anybody starting a business, 100%, you have to make the sacrifices, and often we do. We don't often count the cost. And it's only when you get to a point like this where you've got a bit of breathing space, I would imagine, where you can look and go, well, okay, look,
Well, I think everything's a trade, everything's an exchange, right? So, I drive one of my business partners. He founded the business with me nuts. I always say nothing for nothing. And when he hears this, he'll chuckle. There is nothing for nothing. So I suppose to answer your question, yes. But as long as you are clear on the trade-off. So we're going to do X, Y, Z, and there's going to be sacrifices, but we are going to acquire a lifestyle if we're successful of Y. Now, in our context, that lifestyle is very important. I'm not going to beat the drum about where we came from, my wife and I, but the lifestyle we can now have is not something we could ever have dreamt of. And the peace of mind and the freedom we can have when it comes to our finances is something that I wish for every human. Not having it and now having it, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's lacquer. And it's worth that trade-off, okay? But there must be other trade-offs. So my wife and I made a deal. We said, okay, I'm doing all of this stuff, but you need your thing. And her thing happened to be teaching. Man, I tell you, the best thing I could have done is afford her that space and time so that she could go to teachers college at the tender age in her 30s and go follow her passion.
Wow.
You know, so there's got to be trade-off for things. But that being said, there's some things I wish could have been different.
Sure.
You know, but we made our trade.
Yeah. And I mean, there must be something incredibly satisfying about going, I've been able to give something that my wife really wanted to do, and it hasn't put any strain on you. I mean, I think that's what anybody wants. I mean, you talk about selfishness, but there comes that compassion again that comes through that I think you may try and hide a bit, but you can't get away from. When you started the business, there was a gap in the market in the wills industry. How important is it for any entrepreneur to be able to spot an opportunity and to go for it? Do you think that you can do it without that?
So depends what you're trying to go for, but I think another critical success factor is if you're going to start something that's me too, okay, with a little bit of a different flavor, I think your chances of success are much slimmer. I always say to people, you must be careful when you use the word innovation versus invention. What we did at Capital Legacy is we invented. We didn't innovate. If you're going to innovate, that means you're taking something and making it better. But your chances of success and carving out a particular market and giving yourself resilience comes from invention and then protecting that space. Now, our particular products, you can't copyright, you can't do anything like that, but you can definitely entrench yourself by having first mover. So I think it's incredibly important that you do set out to be truly unique, not just because you took something and put a different flavor on it, but you actually invented something. For
those guys who have missed an opportunity and are trying to innovate because they can't invent at this point, do you think there is, I mean, how would you encourage them to keep going? Or how would you encourage them to make something of what they're doing?
There still needs to be a piece of invention. So if, for example, you missed a boat on something or someone, and someone's got the jump on you, there must be a crack in their armor, a chink in their armor that you can exploit. So for example, it might be in the distribution chain. Maybe you can invent something there. Maybe you can take a different perspective, completely different perspective, and then you can take the market away from that first mover. There's many stories of people who've come in after a first mover, but it's because they've exploited a chink in the armor, and it comes down to invention. They saw something in their supply lines, their distribution lines, their production lines, their client service lines, their system, their tech. There must be something that you think you can invent and do better with the same thing.
You embrace technology and you use it to your advantage. Is that a key thing that separates you from other businesses? The fact that as a CEO, you have a sense of how to use technology and you have embraced it and you drive it. I mean, you've got an innovation team that works on the products that you want to develop.
So I've got the benefit of hindsight now, and I was having a chat to one of our shareholders the other day, and we were talking about several businesses. Some have got off-the-shelf systems that serve their core business, their client journey, their production journey, their product journey, their transactional journeys. And then we were speaking about businesses that had built their own. If anyone that speaks to me will know, I'm vehemently against using third party for stuff that's core to your business that makes you unique. I'm all in favor of using off-the-shelf stuff that everyone else does, payroll, accounting. Why waste your precious development time on that stuff? But the stuff that makes you unique, I believe that you should do yourself. And I think I won the debate with this particular individual with one simple argument. I said, look at all these businesses. The two that are multi-billion rand businesses, the difference between those two and the others is that these two have their own systems.
You started this business with partners. Did that help you through the difficult times, or did it make things more difficult having to spread the love?
We would not be here today if it wasn't for that tactic.
And how did you pick them? I mean, what made you choose those two guys or three guys that you started with? What were the qualities that separated them?
Well, the one particular individual is because he told me I was crazy. He told me where I was wrong. He told me where I was going to be wrong. And that was exactly the kind of person, and he's just a really good human. And I think we just had a great connection at the time, which we still do. The other individual, I was wet behind the ears when it came to business administration. I felt that if he could take that off, then myself and the other chap could then go forth into the market, because it's all well and good to be stuck in your office counting the Excel cells, but you actually got to get into the field, and I felt that was necessary. And like I said, we would not be here today if I didn't have that tactical partnership. Rather give up quite a bit, to get somewhere, because you can't do it all yourself. It's too vast.
It seems that it's quite an important component of any partnership that you have to have that one person that tells you, who's prepared to stand up to you. And I mean, you are a formidable person to stand up to. But it seems that that's a critical thing to have in business. Is somebody who can say to you, actually, Alex, you're wrong. You're not doing this right. You've got to rethink this. Is that true?
100% true. You know the age-old saying, you surround yourself with yes men, you're only going to get your answer. So I think one of the things that has, you kind of intimated it. I can be a bulldozer at the best of times, and if you're able to stop the bulldozer, that means you and yourself must have really strong argument. But I'd like to think I've encouraged that, and the best argument must win, especially in the starting stages of a business. I think that kind of thing can also paralyze a business in its sort of middle stage of development, where there's, and I'm going to talk out of turn for being politically correct, but having too many voices and too many opinions means that you're not going anywhere. And sometimes you do need a strong leader who's going to make the calls, and even if they're wrong, at least you take in a direction. So I'm always cautious with people when they try to be too collaborative. I caution that, and that's why you need a strong leader, and that's why typically very big successful businesses, I believe, are characterized by very strong individuals who have got their way, because you need that go forward. The problem is they also need to be wrong half the time.
Yeah. One of the things, again, that I've noticed about you, and this is, again, from outside of the organization, is that you're very quick to admit when you're wrong internally. I don't know if you've done it externally. How many times have you been wrong?
More than I've been right. But at least I'll try.
Yeah, exactly. Who was it? Gary Player said, the more you practice, the better you get, or the more lucky you get.
Yeah, I know how to make a bugger up and own it. But I go back to, I say this to many guys, if you want the same result, then do the same as everyone else. If you want to get the exceptional result, then it comes down to simple odds and mathematics. You then need to put yourself out there with an action that is so extreme that you're either going to have a 50% chance of success, because if that success comes off, it's going to be that much more than everyone else, or it's going to be abject failure. And it's just about managing what that abject failure looks like. Do you have a cushion to land on that you can come back? If you've got one chip at the poker table, you can still win the game.
Yeah, that's true. We talked about partnerships. We talked about how important it was in the formation of this business. The other thing that it seems in a business of this size, or any business that employs people, is that you're only as good as the people that you employ. What has been your success story and the strategy that you've adopted in employing people? Because you've got a great bunch of staff here. They all seem to fit the same mold. What's the secret there? How have you done that?
I'm going to ask you pass on this question, because to this day, I'm asked, like, how would you explain your culture, or how would you explain your DNA? Your question about how would you explain your people? I think that the thing that we did very well is that when we were building this thing, and continue to still build this thing today, it's about having equality around the table, treating you like my business partner, but at the same time also being really invested in them being better. So pulling them to one side and saying, the next time, let's not do it that way. But I've also made lots of mistakes with my people. And I suppose that's when you've got to message them at night and say, listen, I was a complete arse. I'm really sorry for losing my temper, or this or that. That is not on. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. And being genuine. But
one of the things you've also done really well is you've managed to keep fun as part of your culture, which maybe people know about or they don't know about. How do you find a balance between running a successful business and still having fun?
Not too sure how we do it, but I think it comes from one particular view. A working class individual is going to spend approximately 80% of their lifetime in terms of that working.
Yeah.
You may as well enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
I want my guys when they're walking here, when I walk in here, to flip and have fun. And we're gonna and part of having fun is not just about, cracking a beer and having a party. It's about achieving things and going for the incredible and going for the impossible and achieving them and sometimes failing at them and picking ourselves up or patting ourselves on the back in the process. That's fun. And I think that's what we bring out and what we brought out in Capital Legacy, that we've got a bunch of people who were nobodies and we made them somebodies.
It must be really difficult, coming back to what you were saying earlier on, when you've got such a successful company and you take the decision to step away, even though you've got this hope that you've got something new in mind and there's something that you can do that's completely different to this. There must be always that pull that's there that goes, damn it, I've left something really successful behind. And what if the new thing doesn't work? Does that plague you at all? Or are you confident enough to know that you're going to...
That's not even the case. My true, leading up to the decision I made last year when I shocked a few people, because, I was defined as being the chief executive of the business and not part of building or starting the business. I don't see it as the success I've built that I'm leaving behind. I see it as the success that we've managed to get this far, and now I think other people can do better than me. Honestly, they can do a better job than me. I got to a point, James, where I realized that I was at the limits of my talents and that I must play away from my weaknesses and play to my strengths. And I needed to get out of the way so that others who are better at what this business needs next can take it forward.
How many CEOs in this country have that kind of insight? I mean, you mentioned a couple of names earlier on, but it's like that. It doesn't strike me that was the kind of the moment that they had, the aha moment, where they recognized, I've reached the end of my skill set in this particular, you didn't put it like that, it wasn't skill set,
talent levels.
Talent levels, yeah. But, that shows a kind of an EQ that doesn't necessarily exist in driven people like people may perceive you.
Look, I think I may just articulate it. I think the other individuals that I do know personally and know it. Yeah. They just won't admit it. Because who wants to admit that maybe you're out of your depth? Yeah. But I think it's strengthening to admit that and say, you can do this better than me. I'm going to go do this. I think it's liberating. Yeah.
What do you think of Trump's tariffs? And how does it affect business? Does it affect your business directly, or how do you think it's affecting business in South Africa?
James, one of the reasons why I stepped out as CEO, so I don't have to give economic opinions and political opinions. So thank you for that, for sucking me in. Because, the problem is, while you're building a business, you don't have too much time to read up on things. But I'll give you my current view as of this morning. I was again chatting to one of my fellow shareholders earlier this week, and obviously like you, the tariffs are high. And it became real when she was telling me about a particular business they're invested in, and this particular business is in a particular supply of a material, and I want to mention it for obvious reasons, that was particularly hit with the tariffs. James, literally overnight, they've had to devalue the business to zero. They have to call on certain guarantees. They've broken and people are going to lose their jobs. Yeah. South Africans are going to lose their jobs now. So I was a bit blasé about the tariff thing, and I thought, okay, well, this too will pass. But hearing that stopped me in my tracks, and I realized that we are up against it as a little country against the US. And I get where they're coming from. I mean, if you look at those deficits that are there, I mean, I can't blame the guy. I mean, if someone was trading with you, James, and that was what
I'd probably
the numbers look like,
I'd probably look at the same,
right?
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's missing that element of well, okay, the third order, fourth order contagion effects of this are massive, and then the human factor is huge, and the complete disregard for that, I think, is what's irking people. The other point is that, and I don't know how right or wrong this is, and I'm no economist, so can all of them come scream at me after this, is that the whole notion is built up on physical goods that are traded. We're forgetting about the elements that I believe actually create the value of the GDP of America, the services, tourism, IP, the software, when people come and visit, spend money in restaurants. That is missing from the equation. I mean, how many people arrive in America every day and go and spend in America on America? And that's missing from this conversation. I just feel it's a bit unfair that it's not been factored in to the equation when we're looking at those deficits that are occurring.
So I think the key thing that you've mentioned that I think will make people sit up and pay attention is people are going to lose their jobs here. people are going to be, my sister's lost her job as a result of some of the decisions that he's made, for example. So it's affected me personally. But there's opportunity there, right? Isn't there? I mean, an economy is built on to a large degree on entrepreneurship and the ability of people to spot opportunities and to make that happen. Do you think that we have enough skill and talent in this country to make that happen, or what would we need to do if we don't?
Listen, there's one thing that everyone knows about a South African is a boere maakplan, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've had a little bit of privilege where I've had the experience of engaging business people and management in other parts of the world, and I can tell you now for sure, us lot of South Africans know how to make a plan and how to turn a bad situation into a good situation. Whether that'll involve the re-employment of these individuals and the restoration of their homes, I'm not sure. I mean, our government at the moment can't step in. So yes, I'm pretty sure we can turn it around. But from now to then is the trouble, and I don't think we can ever recover from this. Kids might be pulled out of school. So there's not too much good I can immediately see that can come out of a small country like ours going up against America with this current fight. But to answer your question directly, if there's any country full of people who can turn this thing around and find another way, it's going to be us.
It's a great place to bring the conversation to an end, because it's a positive note in what seems to be a pretty bleak economic outlook for both South Africa and perhaps the rest of the world. I do want to end on a slightly lighter note.
Cool.
I want to do quick fire questions, which are completely random. First question, what music relaxes you?
Electric swing jazz.
Best South African holiday spot for you?
South Coast.
South Africa, stay or go?
Stay.
Government of national unity, good or bad for South African business, and why?
Excellence. Confidence.
Which comes first, family or work?
Cuck question. Work.
Netflix or Prime?
Netflix.
Who's the biggest influence in your life?
My dad.
If you had to do this interview all over again, where would your story start?
When I dropped out of school.
Well, there's a whole new interview that we should say. Thanks for throwing that at me right at the end. Yeah, we didn't even get into that. Alex, you are our first Maverick that we have spoken to. And I mean, I think the story is true. It's like you are a Maverick who has made a success of yourself in this country and a success of the business that you've launched. And there's so much that we can learn from you. So all the best for the new ventures that you're heading into.
Thanks, James.